Hello! Welcome to the first episode of CYOTOPIA. So we're Laura Lam and Dr. Sinead Collins. And so what the hell is CYOTOPIA? We have created two versions of the future where we hit net zero carbon emissions by 2050 in both of them. But in one, they're less equitable, and in the other, it's more equitable. And one's focusing more on individual action, and one's looking more at systemic action. And we've really creatively named them
Carrot and Stick.
You can guess which is which.
Mm-hmm.
And so in each episode, we're going to kind of look at a specific angle and kind of go into that in more detail. And why the hell are we doing this? What makes us remotely qualified? Good
remotely
question.
Being the key word here.
Yeah, remotely. Basically, we're both professional Imagineers.
Not the Disney kind.
Not the Disney kind. So I am a science fiction and fantasy author, and also a creative writing lecturer at Edinburgh Napier, which is over there from where we're filming. And one of my latest books is Goldilocks, which looks a lot at climate change and near future fiction, and Sinead helped me a lot with the science of it. And you are?
I am Sinead Collins. I am a biologist at the University of Edinburgh, and I work in understanding how phytoplankton, algae, single-celled green plants that live in the ocean, or like to call it life-giving slime, responds to climate change. I'm an evolutionary biologist, so that's the perspective I take on it, and apparently I also now help with sci-fi books,
Exactly.
which was so fun.
That was super fun. Yeah, so we met 3 years ago at a cafe, which is also there, which you can't see, where we were both hiding from the internet and from mobile reception. They also have great coffee. And I spilled avocado toast on myself, Sinead, and you, evidently. We both kind of cleaned the green slime off of us, which was not algae, and then became friends and realized that science and art and creativity are really super intertwined.
With that, we'll just jump in. And I've been working on climate change. Well, it is my job. And I've been thinking about this since the early 90s, which is when I was in high school. I got to continue working on it in very roundabout ways until now. And working on climate change is both incredibly depressing and incredibly interesting and hopeful. And my main take on it is that we don't have time to give in to the depression. We don't have time to hide under our desks and angst because our house is on fire and we can't panic. We have to put it out. And this means that rather than give in to the doom and gloom, we're peddling hope and glory.
Yeah.
And I have to say the most hope and glory I have felt as a climate change scientist was when the climate marches started, and when I was going to climate marches and carrying snacks for kids who were just screaming. And this was glorious. This gave me real hope that politicians were going to listen to people and start making the kind of big systemic changes that we need.
That they would have to listen because we were very loud.
Because we were extremely loud and we had snacks, so we were not going home early.
Exactly. But then the problem was COVID happened and everything had to stop. And this has actually given us kind of a taste of what's to come, which I don't think a lot of people fully realize. So every aspect of our lives are going to have to change over the next 3 decades. And there's going to be loads more disruption.
So we have to save the world with constant disruption.
Yeah. And we don't know what the next problem is really going to be. There could be another pandemic tomorrow that's, more difficult to treat. We just don't know.
Oh, come on. Forest fires, hurricanes, plagues of locusts, literal plagues of locusts.
Oh, remember the murder hornets?
Yeah, they were in chapter 1 of this book.
Yeah.
Can't wait for the finale of 2020.
Oh, God. But the thing is we have the chance to totally remake the world, right? Here now and fast enough that we're actually going to see the outcome of the revolution if you plan to be here for the next 30 years.
And I do.
I do too. So it's basically going to be the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, and feminist and intersectional science fiction mixed up together and played super fast.
Very fast.
Very fast.
Very fast. We're going to get whiplash.
Yeah.
But the idea is to come out the other side with the whiplash. So to have a 50% chance of staying on track for a mere 1.5 degrees warming by 2050, we need to cut carbon emissions by 50% per decade, every decade from the level of the decade before. Just to put that in perspective, we've cut carbon emissions 50% since 1990. And those of you with even the most basic of math skills will realize that from 1990 until now has been 30 years, which is terrifying because 1990 is when I started high school.
I was 2.
She was 2. So at that point, I was better equipped to deal with this reality. So that means we need super rapid decarbonization of energy, changes of building materials, revolutions in food production, better sustainability in almost everything we do, massive amounts of engineering, and we need a way to actually scale up carbon removal eventually. So this is not a small order. This really is like all the revolutions at once on like fast forward.
Yeah, exactly.
And just to keep this in mind with this 1.5 degrees warming, which is really a moonshot goal, we've already committed to things like sea level rise, warming, extreme weather, and massive displacements of people. And this probably isn't our last pandemic. So what we're trying to get across here is we've committed to a lot of disruption, and we've committed to a lot of really bad and just frankly weird weather, but we don't have to commit to bad lives. We can in fact build better ones.
Exactly. So what happened when the world seemed to stop between March and June? Because that was a very strange period of time, especially here in Edinburgh.
Well, we discovered that we have a love-hate relationship with Zoom was one of the things that's really stuck with me.
And WebEx.
And WebEx. In fact, any virtual communication. But apart from that, what I noticed in the rare moments when I got to get away from my computer, as we moved entire university curricula online, was that the world was incredibly quiet. So we live in a city composed mostly of stone, and for the first time since I moved to Edinburgh, it was quiet. I didn't hear any cars.
Exactly. I went on lots of walks like through Old Town and up to the castle pretty early in the morning, and it was just like empty. There was nobody there. It felt apocalyptic, and it was very strange.
And of course Nessie returned, and there were sheep gangs in Wales and like dolphins in Venice.
Nature is healing.
Nature was healing. There were deer in the park here. It was really quite nice.
There were not actually dolphins in Venice, but
I know.
I wish there were. I know.
Okay. Maybe unicorns in Venice? Anyway, so the point is, we were living in a world with almost no cars. And in this world with almost no cars, you'll all notice that a lot of things kept going. Food kept getting delivered. Toilet paper eventually made it to wherever it had to be. Emergency vehicles could go. Trains were running so that key workers could get where they had to. And people started walking and cycling. So things got different, but we were by no means stranded. So in terms of carbon emissions, because that was the question on everyone's mind, certainly the questions that were coming to me, we didn't actually do that good. So we're going to link to some papers below. There's one really nice accessible one. And the short answer is that at the very peak of COVID lockdowns, we were all stuck in our houses, going out once a day to exercise in this like frenzied hour.
I didn't actually realize it was an hour, so I was going for like 3-hour walks and then belatedly realized I wasn't meant to do that. Whoops.
We were going out like super early to avoid people because that we didn't know like how dangerous it was or not. But the short answer is in countries with a lot of ground transport where people rely heavily on cars, at the peak lockdown, individual countries were down by about 25% in carbon emissions over very short time periods. And the mean global daily decrease was about 17% at the height of the pandemic. So since then, carbon emissions have gone more or less back to normal, and we're looking at a global annual reduction of between 4 and 7% for the year. So that's not huge. And to put that in perspective, to achieve our carbon cut goals using only this type of lockdown, we need to do this every year until 2050, which is not my preferred way to meet our climate change goals.
No.
So what we got to was about 2006 levels, and that's good, but not good enough.
Exactly. But there was such a huge increase in active transport that this does point to a systemic change, which will hopefully continue forward. Mm-hmm. So here are some stats from the department, or the UK Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, which just rolls off the tongue.
Oh, totally. So based on this, UK greenhouse gas emissions have been dropping. So in 2019, the total emissions were about 55% of which they were what they were in 1990. So we did get emissions to drop by 50%, but we didn't do it over a decade, we did it over 3 decades. So we need to do the same thing, only faster.
Yeah. That number did include flights though, which did surprise us.
That's promising. However, when you looked at where those emissions were coming from, the ones from transport haven't really changed much. So while emissions from other sources are dropping, emissions from transport are holding steady. So you can imagine if we could get emissions from transport down, how awesome that would be.
And this is about a third of total UK emissions. So in the last 20 years in the UK, most traffic is cars. It's about 80%, and it's obviously gone up. And van traffic has increased a lot, and this is unsurprising because we're getting groceries delivered, Amazon is a thing, and so on. Traffic in urban areas is more or less steady, but there's a huge increase in traffic outside of cities. So motorway traffic is up almost 24%, and rural road traffic is up between 15 and 20%. And again, this is based on data from Department for Transport. So solving transport means finding better ways to connect people to cities that they don't live in, pretty much. So things like high-speed rails, less cars.
And commuting.
Commuting
in places people don't live.
But yeah.
And within cities, it means making the cities more human friendly, so we can cycle and walk.
Exactly.
And scooter.
Exactly. And according to another organization called Sustrans, a lot of people would be really happy to do basic living without a car. I don't have a car in the city. For the most part, it's okay, but I do wish, there were more options and that it was a bit cheaper, because bus transport is still fairly expensive, really.
Yeah, I have a car that I use exclusively to get to the Highlands to hike, and in the city I have this super sexy glow.
I like that it has a mustache.
It has a mustache because I feel like that's where I'm failing on the hipster front, is my inability to grow a mustache has been insurmountable.
Alas.
Basically. Alas. And so I've just put one on my bike helmet, and I'm hoping for the best with that.
So during COVID,
during COVID, car use went down to 20 to 30% of normal, compared to an equivalent time in previous years, but it's since gone completely back to normal. So even though people have realized they can cycle and walk as winter encroaches upon us, people are going back to their cars. Rail, bus, and tube trips also declined, and they've not quite gone back to normal yet. In the UK, that's because we still have social distancing rules in place, so those things can't run at capacity right now. But there's no reason they won't be able to run at capacity in the future
at some point.
We're not quite sure when the future is in terms of things running at capacity again. And interestingly, and this is my favorite, cycling is up to about 130% of normal, and you can definitely see that as you cycle around. There's a whole bunch of new cyclists out there doing all sorts of weird new
me.
doing
I'm not very good at cycling.
Cyclist shit.
Yes.
But at some points of the pandemic, cycling was up 300%, and this makes me super happy, both because it's an incredibly efficient way to get around, especially in a city like Edinburgh, where simply parking the car can take you most of the day, and also because it's really hard to be truly angry at the world when you're on a bike.
Yeah.
It is just my preferred way to get from A to B, no matter what.
And so, to sum up, future cities have to, 1, get people out of their cars, 2, prepare rather than just react to disasters like climate and pandemics and who knows what other plot twists the world is going to throw at us.
We can't wait.
Yeah, and we basically have to be better at long-term thinking, which humans in general are not that great at.
We're not. We're really good at projecting these future dystopias. But we're trying to make a strong case for Star Trek rather than Mad Max.
Yeah,
actually,
we're trying to be more optimistic than pessimistic, even in our pessimistic world.
It's true, and I'm doing this by drinking tea, Earl Grey hot, like a certain starship captain.
Tea, Earl Grey hot.
Tea, Earl Grey hot. Earl Grey.
Tea, Earl Grey hot.
And I'm drinking Mayan chocolate.
Drink of the gods.
Exactly. So our first world is stick, and the illustration we're about to show you and talk over voiceover style is by Alex Naughton, who's an amazing Scottish-based illustrator. We'll also link to his website and such below. And our hope is that as we move through both of these worlds, we really want it to be collaborative. So please do feel free to comment on how you think your area of the world would look like in either carrot or stick, because obviously we're a bit more UK focused because that is where we live and where it's easiest for us to find information.
Yeah, we also live near a lot of water and away from most things warm.
Exactly.
So the Scottish version of this is going to be really concerned with wind and sea level rise. and maybe less concerned with tropical storms and heat waves.
Exactly.
Although we will be concerned with those, just less than the wind, which you'll immediately understand if you ever see us filming outside on a windy day.
Yeah. All right. So without further ado, here is Stick. All right. So this is Stick, which we have up here on the screen for you, and we're going to show you our two worlds. But this is a reminder just that both of these worlds have met their carbon emissions goals of net zero by 2050. But they both will still have crazy weather and sea level rise because there's no way to avoid that anymore. Both are going to have fewer cars and more bikes. Both are going to have more migrants and people. And both are going to have high-speed, long-distance trains. We imagine that this one here has come through from Moscow or something like that. And this is obviously Edinburgh.
Obviously.
Yes. So what else do you notice in this, Sinead?
Well, I noticed Northbridge. But so one of my favorite features of this one is that there's still the guy selling hot dogs at the foot of Leith Walk, but now he's in a gondola with sharks circling. Some of the details that I really liked, or like isn't really the right word, some of the details that struck me about Stick is that it's kept the emphasis on cheap things and crap stuff. So it's still a world that's very much the same as it is now in terms of people are buying lots of crap, and there are some very, very rich people. We have Frump Tower here and shady deals being done outside it. And also some very, very poor people, as you can see, the huge crowds outside the job center. But there are some cool things, such as the bikes that are going everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the weather is shown by the little like portable clouds, and we've still got some hoverboards as well and a Zeppelin. But you can also tell that like building safety is not a huge priority in Stick. And so some of these are in quite poor repair. This poor guy down here at the bottom is just sitting in his living room, and there's no wall for him. Compared to over here, you can't afford it, which is just, you know, probably the swankiest of swanky flats with a limo outside.
Exactly. I'm not sure about the sunbathers. Now, this might just be because I am not actually Scottish, so I didn't grow up here, but I feel like 1.5 degrees will not be sufficient to sunbathe in Scotland.
Like 2 days a year, maybe.
Tops off.
Yeah. Well, any excuse, you can see the very, very pale people turn very, very red very quickly. So yeah, you can tell that people are burning things in trash cans and just not doing terribly well. So gap of rich and poor is probably still quite stark.
So this is a world where carbon emission goals have been met, but we haven't really changed the way we're doing anything. And so in my mind, this is sort of the idea that big business will save us all. And indeed here they do from a climate point of view, and they make quite a lot of money doing it. And you can see that there's people with money, and the people without money are doing quite poorly. Worse than usual, given relative to Edinburgh today.
Yeah. So that is a less shiny view of the future with Stick, but let's now be a little more hopeful and go to Carrot.
That Alex has put all sorts of detail in these pictures, and people should go through and find stuff and note it and sort of say how it will translate to other parts of the world. Because of course this is Edinburgh, and we still have our high-speed train going under Northbridge, but now we have, I kid you not, raised cycle lanes. This is my dream.
I know I would be much less intimidated cycling around because I'm a very like nervous cycler. I haven't done it very much. I'm that one that you don't want to share the road with because I have no idea what I'm doing, and I probably make everyone very stressed. But this looks quite calm and quite interesting. And like even just first glances, you can see things are more open. You have the beautiful urban farm in the middle, which I love. So you have more
essential things and useful stuff.
Yeah, essential things and useful stuff. So we buy less and make it last longer. There's also the rechargeable cars outside of useful stuff. So it seems like there's probably less private car ownership and more sharing.
There aren't any of those big limos going around. So that's, I think, positive.
Yeah. And the You Can't Afford It is now the Immigration Welcome Center, and they're happily welcoming an astronaut and Darth Vader Maybe an alien? Not sure.
Well, I'm a little concerned about Darth Vader moving in, but if he brings lightsabers, I might be for it. I also noticed that there's a much wider variety of bicycles in Carrot. So people are cycling, and not only people who are sort of super able-bodied. So you do have some hipsters on their racing bikes, but you also have some sit-down bikes that have electricity symbols on them. So I take it that they're electric. You have some cargo bikes. You have some tricycles. So overall, it looks like cycling has been made much, much more accessible. So you can still cycle down to the foot of Leith Walk and paddleboard out and get your hot dog. Just be careful of the shark.
Yeah, which somehow they've taken up residence in the shallows of Leith. And the job center is now a community hub.
Mm-hmm. And the nice thing is, notice that in Carrot, people are still experiencing the crazy weather, but they're sheltered from it. And so there are sort of big shelters that will keep out both sun and rain. There's a lot more greenery, so a lot more trees, which gives you sheltered areas. And so you can't escape that weather is going to get crazier. But in this world, people don't have to just put up with it. They can still go outside and use the outdoors, which is, I think, super important.
Yeah, and the buildings look less like they're about to fall into the sea, which is also a plus.
And Princess Street Gardens now appears to be a forest.
Yeah, I'm for that. It used to be a moat, so it's very fertile soil, evidently. I think I remember that on some tour I did one time, a long time ago.
The Zeppelin is being struck by lightning, which makes me a little bit nervous, but we'll just hope for the best right this moment.
Yeah. So these are the versions we have so far, but we're going to be adding to these, or well, Alex is, as we ask him kindly to add various things. And so you'll get to see these worlds continue to evolve as we continue to go through CYOTOPIA. But we definitely really want to see what you think your corner of the world would look like. Even if you're in Edinburgh, you could add on to this. But if you're anywhere else in the world, would really like to know what you think your version of Carrot and Stick would be.
In a lot of climates, the summertime temperatures are going to get dangerously hot, right? So these are different things to consider in different parts of the world.
Yeah. And so in our next episode, we're going to look more at migrants and how people are going to have to move as certain areas of the globe become more inhospitable, and how that in itself will prove its own challenges and may change the way that cities look like or how we kind of organize ourselves. And yeah, we'll have another episode soon. We'll hopefully maybe also be interviewing some scientists. So we hope that you enjoyed our first episode of CYOTOPIA and that you will continue following us as we create these two different worlds, hopefully with your help.
Thank you. And add all the things to the comments.
Yes. And the usual YouTube thing of like and subscribe and click a bell, because evidently the bell is important, and things like that, so that this can reach more people, because we don't know what we're doing with algorithms. But yeah, thank you very much and have a good evening.